Dexter Morgan has outsmarted killers with genius-level IQs, with some being several times more brutal than he is. Today we're ranking them all, from the most jaw-droppingly reckless to the few who genuinely came close to breaking Dexter. Here's 7 different levels of smartness in the Dexter franchise. Let's start with villains who had no business stepping into Dexter's world. At this level, we've got Matt Caldwell, Stan Liddy, Ray Speltzer, and Levi Reed from Original Sin. Matt Caldwell is the textbook case. I mean, he's that spoiled, reckless rich kid who shot a deer, hit someone with his boat, and figured his father's money would keep him insulated from any real consequences. He had no plan, no alibi, and absolutely no idea that the man calling himself Jim Lindsay was actually Dexter Morgan. A 50-year-old Dexter, out of practice for the better part of a decade, took Matt down in one cold encounter. Without his father protecting him, Matt was nothing more than another reckless sociopath who would have landed in a cell. But that's just a warm-up. Stan Liddy was slightly more dangerous, and only because he actually got close to the truth. As a dirty ex-cop turned private investigator, Liddy pieced together the Bay Harbor Butcher connection and figured out that Dexter had something to hide. While that was impressive, what came after it wasn't. Now, Liddy's grand plan was to abduct Dexter, throw him in the back of a van, and demand his badge back from Quinn. But even restrained in the back of that van, Dexter outmaneuvered him. Liddy ended up dead on the floor of his own vehicle, killed by the exact man he thought he had cornered. Ray Speltzer and Levi Reed complete level 1. Speltzer hunted women through them dressed as a minotaur, which is actually as disturbing as it sounds. But for all the theatrics of the setup, he was brutish and lazy in execution. He just beat his victims to death and pocketed an earring as a trophy. When Dexter came for him, it ended with a handwritten note, a shovel, and a crematorium. Levi Reed from Original Sin was even less of a threat. In the franchise, he's a drug addict and a remorseless killer who let his guard down the one moment he beat the Shapiro case on a legal technicality. He was so complacent that Harry Morgan was almost capable of taking him out himself. All Dexter needed was a dark alley and a syringe full of M9. Levi was gone in a blink. Now these level 1 killers had one thing in common. The moment Dexter's crosshairs settled on them, it was all over. However, the level 2 villains had a spark of cleverness keeping them dangerous. At this level of smartness, we've got Sweet Lila West, George King the Skinner, and the Dorsey couple. Lila West was more of a distraction than a direct threat. She was everything from seductive and manipulative to surgically precise in identifying psychological pressure points. Lila worked her way into Dexter's personal life and professional circle at the same time. The problem was the game she understood was manipulation, not predation. And when she escalated to murder, burning Sergeant Dokes alive in the cabin, she crossed a line. When she fled to Paris, Dexter followed. In the end, she had a knife in her chest before she even settled in Paris. George King, the Skinner, lands here for a different reason. His murder method was grotesque and genuinely frightening, but his entire operation was built around hunting a dead man. Freebo was already gone by the time King was tearing through Miami looking for him, which means his whole campaign of torture was built on bad info. Even with Dexter tied down to a table in a completely controlled position, King managed to lose him. Anyone careless enough to leave Dexter alone doesn't deserve a higher ranking on this list. The Doomsday Killer's disciples, Beth and Steve Dorsey, round out this level. Steve's death at Dexter's hands forced Dexter to examine his own crime scene, a genuinely uncomfortable position. Beth nearly took out the entire Miami Metro Homicide Department with the wormwood poison that the Doomsday Killer gave her, and she almost pulled it off. Dexter inhaled some of the chemical himself and still came out on top. Overall, they were little more than speed bumps in Dexter's pursuit of Travis Marshall, it barely slowing him down, making them unworthy of any higher ranking. Level 3, the middle of the pack and the most frustrating level on this list, these are the villains who had actual potential and threw it away. They were smart and motivated, but they just made dumb choices. Aaron Spencer, the Miami Metro captain in Original Sin, is an example of squandered potential. As the head of the homicide department, he had more cover and reach than almost anyone else in this level. He'd been living with the suspicion that his wife had been unfaithful for 14 years. When it became too much, he kidnapped a child from another prominent family to create a pattern before abducting Nikki, his wife's suspected love child, as the real target. The collateral damage to young Jimmy Powell was, to Spencer, simply the cost of believable misdirection. But his grief became so theatrical, so over the top, that Dexter spotted the performance from across the room. One round of vetting, one cold read of the man's behavior, and Spencer met the business end of Dexter's knife. Christine Hill, the secret daughter of Trinity, operated in the shadows more effectively than most level 3 killers managed. She spent years on the periphery of Arthur Mitchell's life, desperate for acknowledgement from a father who kept her hidden while parading his legitimate children around as proof of his perfect facade. When Special Agent Frank Lundy came to Miami chasing the Trinity Killer, Christine took matters into her own hands, masked up one night and shot both Lundy and Deb Morgan, killing Lundy and leaving Deb in critical condition. She ran interference against the police investigation for months, doing whatever she could to keep the heat off Arthur. For Dexter, the attack on Deb was personal. He believed Trinity did it. In that way, Christine's actions rippled through the season's entire arc and cost Rita her life. Christine never made it to Dexter's table, but she took her own life. Miguel Prado is another example of what Level 3 really means. Despite being an ADA with genuine power, once he saw Dexter dispose of a body, he wanted in. For a while, it looked like it was the right thing to do. Miguel lied, manipulated everyone around him, and used his influence to stay one step ahead of scrutiny. His only flaw was ego that outgrew his judgment. The moment he killed an innocent person to satisfy himself, the code was gone. In the end, Dexter strangled him without ceremony. Let's go to Level 4. Now these ones are a different breed of smartness. Level 4 killers are not motivated by family wounds or wounded pride. They're driven by something rawer and harder to reason with. These are the killers who simply want to hurt as many people as they can for as long as they're allowed to do it. The Barrel Girls gang, Boyd Fowler, Cole Harmon, Alex Tilden, and the rest of the group rallying around Jordan Chase are the defining example of this tier. Individually, most of them wouldn't crack Level 1. Collectively, they became something genuinely threatening, though. Jordan Chase's take-it philosophy convinced the men around him that they were entitled to kidnap, abuse, humiliate, and ultimately murder women if that was what they wanted. And because he framed it as empowerment rather than madness, he built loyalty that didn't crack even as Dexter and Lumen Pierce picked the group off one by one. At one point, the duo were nearly killed and nearly captured by police in the same operation, an operational failure that almost never touched Dexter. The gang's teamwork and Chase's psychological manipulation made them far more dangerous than the villains in lower tiers. From Leon Prater's serial killer circle in Resurrection, Mia LaPierre and the tattoo collector carve out their own places in this tier. Mia's methods were psychological and physical torture in the same way. Any man could find himself strapped to her torture apparatus, watching her lay out instruments before she burned his corneas out. She had no deeper motive than the fact that she enjoyed it. The tattoo collector, known as Lel, was the same breed of pure predator. He ripped skin from his victims and kept the pieces because he liked looking at them. Whether they were alive when he did, it is unclear, and that ambiguity is part of what makes so unsettling. With an estimated 26 victims and no signs of slowing, he was a killing machine operating entirely on impulse and appetite. Dexter shut Lel down with Lel's own anesthesia, but without the intervention, there is little doubt he would have doubled that count and kept climbing. Level 5. On Level 5 of Smartness are impressive adversaries. Prolific, clever, and genuinely capable of forcing Dexter to change his approach mid-operation. These killers are not the kind of threat you dismiss after a single encounter. They are so smart that going after them requires more than Dexter's standard playbook. Kurt Caldwell in New Blood is the clearest Level 5 example. In Iron Lake, he was the most powerful and beloved figure in the community. Generous, warm, the kind of man everyone turned to for help. But under that, he'd been hunting runaway women for decades, embalming their bodies and keeping them in a private underground installation that Angela Bishop had been circling for years without ever cracking. Kurt wore his mask better than almost anyone. It never slipped in public, not even once. When he figured out that Dexter had killed Matt, he didn't panic and he didn't rush. He just took his time dismantling Dexter's new life piece by piece. He burned down their home. He had Dexter kidnapped and set up for execution in front of Harrison. He anonymously fed evidence of Matt's murder to Angela. He basically burned the entire architecture of Dexter's existence to the ground. Isaac Serco from Season 7 had an entirely different kind of power behind him. The full weight of the Koshka Brotherhood, an international criminal organization with resources and reach that made him functionally untouchable in most contexts. He was a trained assassin who pieced together that Dexter had killed his lover, Victor Baskoff, and came to Miami not to make noise but to settle accounts quietly. He tracked Dexter and nearly shot him one morning while Dexter was picking up donuts. He had Dexter genuinely on the ropes for stretches of the whole season, and the only reason their conflict resolved when it did was because the Brotherhood turned on Isaac for slowing their business operations. I mean, what could have happened if they didn't? Al Jolly Walker from Leon Prater's Inner Circle in Resurrection earned his place in that exclusive gathering through 19 documented victims in Wisconsin alone. His method was charm, and then strangulation, and then a ponytail cut from the body as a keepsake. He was smart enough to sense Dexter long before Dexter could close the trap. The moment the other members of Prater's circle started disappearing, Walker stood Dexter up and drove back to Wisconsin without leaving a forwarding address. He didn't let on what area of the state he lived in. He knew better than to be alone with someone who was quietly eliminating everyone around them. In the end, a file in Prater's vault gave up his last name and ultimately his location. But the fact that he was the only member of that circle to genuinely shake Dexter is one big deal. The Gemini killers, the Gareth twins from Resurrection, sit at the upper edge of level 5 and make a compelling case for being the most brilliant opponents outside the top 2 tiers. Mensa-level intellects, graduated top of their respective classes, stage their kills in pairs, bodies arranged in the formation of the Gemini zodiac symbol, always killed in match sets with a method so precise that the FBI's most wanted list couldn't connect the pattern. They tracked Dexter to his actual residential address in New York, but their flaw was the oldest one in the book. They believed they were the smartest people in every room they walked in. That arrogance caused the first twin to track Dexter directly to his door instead of working the angle from a safer distance. It caused the second twin to make an attempt on Dexter's life in front of Prater himself, in front of witnesses, 2 separate Gareths, 2 separate body bags, level 6. Level 6 is where the smartness rankings stop being about kill counts and methods and start being about the ability to get inside Dexter's head. The villains in this tier didn't just kill, they manipulated, evaded, and threatened the things Dexter actually cared about. At the very start is Hannah McKay, the queen of this level. She started killing at 15, willingly participating in Wayne Randall's murder spree before turning the narrative around and convincing everyone it was all his doing when they were caught. From that point forward, manipulation was as natural to her as breathing. When Dexter eventually got her on his table, she talked her way off it, something almost no one in the show's history ever managed to pull off. She made an attempt on Deb's life and survived, despite the fact that Dexter killed his own brother for targeting Deb. She drugged both Dexter and Deborah, which meant she had the window to kill them both and chose not to. She was arrested again, escaped before trial, surfaced back in Dexter's life, and then vanished to Argentina with Harrison when the walls closed in. She poisoned people for convenience, and there's no clear record of how many victims accumulated to her years in South America because she was never caught again. The only thing that stopped Hannah McKay was her own pancreas failing her. She was too smart to die in Dexter's hands. Brian Moser? Yep, he's a level 6. Dexter's brother, the ice truck killer, left bloodless, posed bodies across Miami, with every crime scene a message to awaken something in Dexter. He dated Deborah specifically to get close. He sent Dexter a severed head, left a dismembered doll in his freezer, constructed an entire crime scene using mannequins, arranged in the exact configuration of the Morgan family photograph. Every move was designed for one person. When he finally revealed himself as Dexter's biological brother, he gave Dexter 2 options: kill Deborah and embrace who you really are, or save her and bury your true nature under Harry's code forever. He was the only one who made Dexter cry, even while slitting his throat. Leon Prater from Resurrection belongs in this level for what he constructed and the precision with which he weaponized it. A billionaire who built a private network of verified killers, curated through rigorous vetting, invited to galas, celebrated and financially compensated for their craft, he did all these from behind so many layers of deniability that law enforcement would likely never reach him. He scanned Dexter's fingerprints at one of his own events and already knew who he was dealing with, before Dexter knew anything. When the confrontation came, Leon had a gun to Harrison's head, which meant he had Dexter in a position so desperate that Dexter offered his own life as a trade. He managed to push Dexter Morgan into a corner where his own son became the leverage. That is a level 6 move, and finally, level 7. Here, we're gonna see brainiacs and the real smarts of the Dexter franchise. These killers operated in the shadows for decades, and they blended so completely that even the FBI couldn't find the seams. And they were Dexter's biggest trouble. Arthur Mitchell, the Trinity Killer, is the gold standard of what level 7 means. 30 years, 279 victim, a 4-stage kill cycle, bludgeoning, femoral artery, forced fall from height, burial alive in wet cement, executed across dozens of cities without leaving a single usable fingerprint. He built his cover at 4 walls, 1 heart construction sites, where the proximity to fresh concrete made disposal efficient, and the charitable optics kept scrutiny at bay. He left only trace amounts of his deceased sister's ashes at the scenes, a forensic signature so obscure it took Frank Lundy the better part of a career to even identify as intentional. In public, he was a church deacon with a warm smile and a spotless reputation. But Dexter identified him faster than Lundy ever had, embedded himself in Arthur's life as Kyle Butler, and still got played. Trinity killed Rita before Dexter could get to him, left baby Harrison sitting in her blood in the bathtub, a move that got Dexter worried that his son would be like him. Arthur predicted it. "It's already over," he told Dexter right before he died. He was not wrong. Oliver Saxon, the brain surgeon, real name Daniel Vogel, is the other pillar of Level 7. He burned a group of children to death while he was still a child himself, then faked his death in the same fire, stole the identity of another deceased teenager, and moved continents, all before he was old enough to drive. He built a new life from nothing, constructed an entirely false persona, and then spent years working his way back toward the mother who'd abandoned him. He removed portions of his victims' brains while they were alive and unmedicated and left them as messages. He did a lot more, and if we keep talking, we'll probably not have an end. Dexter killed him in a police holding cell with a pen, staged as self-defense on camera, one of the most audacious in the series. But it meant nothing since Deb was already dead, one of Saxon's messiest kills. And then there is Dexter Morgan himself, standing at the absolute top of Level 7, above every killer on this list. A forensic genius who worked inside the very system hunting him for decades without a single confirmed exposure. His double life was so separated that his colleagues, his family, and his closest friends never doubted him. He outsmarted the FBI, tracked Hannah McKay to a different continent, and killed his own brother. He's even faked his death. No one ever truly caught Dexter, making him the smartest of all killers in the franchise. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a deep dive. And check out our video breaking down why Dexter vs. Quinn isn't even close. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.